Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into mental strength?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Today we're cracking open 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do by Amy Morin.
Oh, yeah. I love this book.
Yeah, it's so insightful.
Yeah,
Right, and I think what makes it even more powerful is that Morin, she's writing from experience.
absolutely. Her own life story is woven throughout.
Yeah, she's dealt with some seriously heavy stuff, losing her mother, then her husband, and then even her fiance.
It's almost unbelievable. It's hard to even imagine.
Right. So you really get a sense that she's not just talking the talk. She's walked the walk when it comes to building mental strength.
Totally. And it's those really tough experiences that led her to identify the things we do that can actually sabotage our own mental strength.
So that's what we're going to be exploring in this deep dive, those pitfalls and more importantly, what we can do about them.
Exactly. Because it's not about, becoming some kind of unfeeling robot.
No, definitely not.
It's about being aware of those thought patterns and habits that can keep us stuck and finding more empowering ways to, deal with life's challenges.
Love that. So let's jump right in. Morin's first point is all about not dwelling on the past.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Right. Seems simple enough, but we all know it can be tough to let go of those past hurts or mistakes. Or even just replaying things over and over in your head.
Totally. And she uses this really great example in the book about a woman named Gloria.
Oh, yeah. What happened with Gloria?
Well, her daughter kept moving back home after these failed relationships. And understandably, Gloria was getting frustrated, but she was so focused on her daughter's past mistakes that it was really, it was preventing her from finding solutions. It was really affecting her happiness in the present.
It's like she was stuck in this loop, right? Replaying those negative events over and over again. And that's what dwelling on the past can do. It keeps us trapped in those negative emotions.
Exactly. It can even become a way of avoiding dealing with current challenges. It's easier to romanticize the past or focus on the good old days than to confront what's difficult right now in the present.
And it makes me think about Marin's own experience after losing her husband. I can't even imagine.
Heartbreaking.
It would have been so easy to just get lost in that grief and stay there. But she made a conscious choice to focus on moving forward.
Which is incredibly difficult to do. It's a testament to her strength.
Absolutely. And it really highlights that, we always have a choice in how we react to things. We can choose to dwell in the past, or we can choose to focus on what we can control.
And that's such a powerful realization. We're not just helpless victims of our circumstances.
Exactly. So Marin suggests we ask ourselves this question. Is this helping or hurting me when we catch ourselves dwelling on the past? And if it's not helping, well, it might be time to shift our focus.
It's a simple question, but so profound.
I know. And that shift might involve forgiveness, right? Forgiving ourselves, forgiving others.
Yeah. Forgiveness is huge. It can be so liberating.
It really can be. And then it's about actively training our minds to focus on the present moment. What can we do right now, today, to move forward?
Love that. It's about taking action instead of getting stuck in the past.
Okay, so what's the next thing mentally strong people don't do?
They don't give up after the first failure.
Oh, I think we can all relate to that one.
Right. It's so easy to get discouraged when things don't go our way.
Totally. And, we all have that fear of failure to some extent.
But the thing is, even the most successful people have faced tons of setbacks. Like Morin talks about Milton Hershey, the chocolate magnate.
Wait, the Hershey's chocolate guy?
Yep, that's him. And guess what? He had multiple failed candy businesses before he ever found success with chocolate.
Really? I had no idea.
It's true. Most people would have given up after one or two failed attempts. But Hershey's persistence is what really set him apart. He just kept learning from his mistakes and kept trying new things.
Wow, I never knew that about him. He even had a successful caramel company that he sold to focus on chocolate. That's a big risk.
And it paid off big time. His story shows the power of, believing in your vision, taking calculated risks, and learning from every setback.
It makes you wonder, right? What if we had pushed through those times when we gave up too soon? What could we have accomplished?
It's a great question to reflect on. What dreams have we abandoned because of fear?
Yeah. So what does Morin suggest we do when we face those inevitable setbacks?
Well, she says the first step is to analyze our mistakes, but without shame. Just figure out what we can learn from them. Then, create a written plan to avoid repeating those mistakes. And finally, work on developing our self-discipline. Because let's be honest, sometimes giving up just comes down to a lack of discipline.
So true. It's like failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone on the path to success.
Exactly. And it's all about how we choose to respond to those failures that determines the outcome.
I love that. Okay, so we've tackled dwelling on the past and giving up after failure. What's next?
Let's talk about resentment,
Ooh, another tricky one.
right? And it's so easy to fall into the trap of resentment, especially these days with social media, where we're constantly bombarded with everyone else's highlight reels.
Oh, totally. It's like everyone else is living these perfect, amazing lives, and we're just, stuck in our own struggles.
And that can lead to feeling inadequate or like life's unfair, which fuels resentment even more.
So how do we break free from that comparison trap?
Well, first, it's important to remember that we're only seeing a tiny sliver of other people's lives. We don't see the behind-the-scenes struggles, the hard work, the setbacks.
Hmm.
Morin uses the story of Herb Brooks, the coach of the Miracle on Ice hockey team, to illustrate this.
Oh, the team that beat the Soviets in the Olympics. That was such an incredible underdog story.
It was. And did you know that Herb Brooks was actually cut from the Olympic team as a player just weeks before the games?
Wow, really? I had no idea.
Yeah. And instead of letting resentment eat away at him, he channeled that experience into becoming an incredible coach. He even told the coach who cut him, "You must have made the right decision, you won." Talk about mental strength.
That's amazing. It shows how we can turn what might seem like a setback into fuel for success.
Exactly. And that's what Morin encourages us to do when it comes to resentment. Define your own version of success based on your values and your goals. Focus on your unique journey, not on comparing yourself to others.
It's a good reminder that comparison really is the thief of joy.
It is.
All right, on to another common pitfall, expecting immediate results.
Oh, this is a big one in our instant gratification world.
Isn't it? We want to lose weight, learn a new language, achieve our goals overnight, but that's just not realistic.
And that impatience can lead to so much frustration and ultimately giving up. Studies show that something like 25% of people abandon their New Year's resolutions within the first week.
It's crazy. Like we set these big goals and then get discouraged when we don't see results immediately.
Morin talks about a client named Marcy who came to therapy expecting a quick fix for her unhappiness. Like a few sessions and bam, instant happiness.
Oh, I think we've all been there at some point, hoping for that magic solution.
Right. But real, lasting change takes time and consistent effort. Marcy eventually realized that therapy was a process, not a magic bullet.
So how do we cultivate patience in a world that's all about speed and instant gratification?
Morin suggests starting by setting realistic expectations. Break down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps. Track your progress to stay motivated, and celebrate those small wins along the way.
It's about appreciating the journey, even when it's not glamorous or easy.
It is. And it's about shifting our focus from the destination to the progress we make each day.
Okay, let's talk about the fear of alone time. This one's interesting to me because it seems counterintuitive. Like, Morin argues that embracing solitude is actually crucial for mental strength.
It might seem that way, especially in our hyper-connected world where we're constantly plugged in and stimulated. But silence and solitude can feel really uncomfortable for many people. We're so used to having noise and distractions that being alone with our own thoughts can be daunting. Morin shares a story about a client named Vanessa who would always have the TV on in the background, even if she wasn't really watching it, just to avoid that quiet.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. It's like we've become afraid of our own company.
It's true. But it's important to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is that involuntary feeling of isolation, while solitude is a deliberate choice to spend time alone for reflection or rejuvenation. It's about creating space for introspection and personal growth.
I used to struggle with this too, feeling like I always needed to be around people or doing something. But I started incorporating even small periods of solitude into my day, and it's made a huge difference in my ability to just decompress and process things.
It's amazing how powerful those quiet moments can be. Morin suggests scheduling alone time, like you would any other important appointment. Consider it a date with yourself.
Love that. Okay, so what if meditation isn't really my thing? Any other suggestions?
Well, mindfulness is a great alternative. It's about bringing your awareness to the present moment without judgment. You can practice mindfulness while you're eating, walking, or even just washing dishes. It's about really tuning into your senses and appreciating the simple things.
It sounds like a good way to quiet the mental chatter and just be present. And what about journaling? Is that something Morin recommends?
Absolutely. Journaling is a fantastic tool for processing emotions, exploring your thoughts, and gaining clarity. It's like having a conversation with yourself on paper.
I find it really helpful for working through tough emotions and just making sense of things. Okay, ready for our last mental hurdle in this section?
Let's talk about entitlement.
Yeah, that feeling that the world owes you something.
Right. And it's something that can really hold us back because it leads to disappointment, resentment, and a lack of motivation. We start comparing our lives to others and wondering why we don't have what they have.
And it can create a victim mentality where we blame others for our circumstances instead of taking responsibility for our own choices and actions.
Morin uses a pretty controversial example to illustrate this. The affluenza defense that was used in a Texas teen drunk driving case.
Wait, what was that?
Well, the argument was that the teenager, because he came from a wealthy family, had never been taught to face consequences for his actions and therefore shouldn't be held fully accountable.
Wow, that's a pretty extreme example. But it does highlight how a sense of entitlement can really distort our perception of reality and even lead to harmful behaviors.
It does. And while most of us probably don't experience entitlement to that degree, it can show up in more subtle ways, like complaining about minor inconveniences or expecting special treatment.
So how do we combat this sense of entitlement?
Morin recommends cultivating a spirit of gratitude. Focus on what you do have, appreciate the good things in your life, even the small things, and maybe, most importantly, shift your focus from taking to giving.
I love that. Recognizing that we have something to offer the world and choosing to contribute in a meaningful way.
Exactly. She uses a truly inspiring story to illustrate this point. The story of Sarah Robinson and Sarah's house.
Tell me about her.
So, Sarah was diagnosed with a brain tumor at a young age, and during her treatment, she witnessed other cancer patients struggling to afford lodging near the hospital. Some were even sleeping in their cars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. But instead of feeling sorry for herself, Sarah used her remaining time and energy to create Sarah's House, a nonprofit organization that provides affordable housing for cancer patients and their families.
That's incredible. What an amazing display of strength and compassion.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does. Even in the face of her own mortality, she chose to focus on making a positive impact on the world. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part. Dwelling on the past, giving up after failure, resentment, impatience, fear of solitude, and entitlement.
That's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's all about recognizing those patterns and then making conscious choices to shift our thinking and our behavior.
Exactly. And the good news is, we have the power to do that.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into mental strength with Amy Morin's book.
Glad to be back.
Me too.
Yeah.
So last time, remember we were talking about all those habits that can sabotage our mental toughness. Dwelling on the past, giving up easily, those kinds of
Yeah, the sneaky pitfalls.
Right. And there's so much more to uncover in Morin's book. So what's next on her list of things mentally strong people don't do?
Well, this one might surprise you. They don't shy away from humility.
Humility. That's interesting. I feel like we usually think of humility as like a weakness, but Morin sees it as a strength.
Exactly. Humility isn't about putting yourself down or pretending you haven't accomplished anything.
Yeah.
It's more about letting this realistic view of yourself.
Yeah.
Acknowledging your strengths, but also being open to learning and growing.
Okay. I see the
Yeah.
distinction.
Yeah. And to illustrate this point, she tells this amazing story about Wilma Rudolph, the Olympic track and field star.
Oh, yeah. Wilma Rudolph. Wasn't she like the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in track at a single Olympics?
She was. But her story is even more incredible when you consider everything she had to overcome, like she was born prematurely, and then as a child she contracted polio.
Polio, wow.
Yeah, and it left her with a twisted leg. She had to wear a leg brace for years.
I can't even imagine the challenges she must have faced both physically and mentally.
It's hard to fathom. Most people would have just given up on their dreams. But Wilma refused to let her circumstances define her. She went through years of physical therapy, eventually learned to walk normally again.
What determination.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And by 12 years old, she was already competing on her school's sports teams, and her talent for running really started to shine.
And then at 16, she's at the Olympics and wins a bronze medal. What a journey.
It's truly inspiring. She never used her past challenges as an excuse. Instead, she just focused on what she could control: her effort, her training, and her mindset.
So where does humility fit into all of this?
Well, even after achieving such incredible success, Wilma remained humble. She was always willing to learn, to push herself further, and to admit that she didn't have all the answers.
That's a really important point. It's not about denying your abilities. It's about recognizing there's always room to grow and improve.
Exactly. Humility lets us learn from our mistakes, seek support when we need it, and stay open to new possibilities. It's a crucial part of resilience and mental strength.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The importance of humility, not dwelling on the past, persevering through failure.
Yeah.
It's all connected, right?
Absolutely, they all reinforce each other.
So what's next on Marin's list of things mentally strong people don't do?
This one's all about setting boundaries.
Okay, boundaries. Yeah, those are important for like healthy relationships and all that.
Right, it's about defining what's acceptable and unacceptable in your interactions with others, and then communicating those limits clearly and assertively.
So it's not just about like having those boundaries in your own mind. You actually have to like communicate them to people.
Exactly. Otherwise, people won't know what your limits are. It's about having the courage to say no when you need to and prioritizing your own needs, even if it means disappointing someone else.
That can be really tough for some people, especially those who are like natural people pleasers.
It can be. Morin tells a story about a client named Megan who struggled with this. She felt obligated to say yes to every request, even if it meant sacrificing her own time and energy. She was terrified of letting people down or coming across as selfish.
I think most of us have been there at some point, right? Like feeling pressured to say yes, even when we really want to say no.
It's a common pattern. But constantly bending over backward to please others can lead to resentment, burnout. It's not sustainable in the long run.
So how do we break free from that people-pleasing trap? How do we get better at setting those boundaries?
Well, it starts with self-awareness. Notice those situations where you tend to overextend yourself or agree to things you don't really want to do. Pay attention to the thoughts and feelings that come up, like, are you afraid of rejection? Do you have a strong need for approval?
Once you've figured out those triggers, what's next?
Then start practicing saying no in a clear and respectful way. You don't need to give some long, elaborate explanation or apologize profusely. Just a simple, I'm sorry, but I can't commit to that right now, is perfectly fine.
It sounds so simple when you say it like that, but it can feel so hard in the moment.
It can. But remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's about taking care of yourself so you can show up as your best self for others.
Okay, I like that reframing. It's not about being mean or uncaring. It's about protecting your own well-being so you can like show up fully for the things and people that matter most.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to the next challenge, taking risks.
Ah, yes. Risk-taking. It can be a bit scary, but it's also essential for growth.
It seems kind of paradoxical though, right? Like we're often told to play it safe, avoid risks. But you're saying mentally strong people actually embrace risk.
They do. Because risk-taking is all about stepping outside your comfort zone, facing uncertainty, and being willing to learn from both the successes and the failures. Without risk, there's no innovation, no creativity, no real breakthroughs.
But taking risks can be scary, especially if you've had some, negative experiences in the past. Like, what if you've tried something and failed before?
Morin talks about a client named Dale who'd always dreamed of starting his own furniture business. He was an incredibly skilled woodworker, super passionate about his craft. But he was terrified to take the financial risk and leave the security of his teaching job.
I can imagine that must have been a tough decision to make.
It was. And he had experienced some financial setbacks in the past, which really fueled his fear. He was so focused on what could go wrong that he wasn't even considering the potential rewards.
So how do we move past that fear and start making more empowered decisions when it comes to risk?
Morin emphasizes the importance of calculated risk-taking. It's not about being reckless or impulsive. It's about carefully assessing the potential benefits and drawbacks, making a plan, and mitigating those risks as much as possible.
Okay, so it's about approaching risk strategically, not just blindly jumping into something without thinking it through.
Exactly. And the more you practice this kind of calculated risk-taking, the more confident and resilient you become. You start to see failure not as a catastrophe, but as a learning opportunity.
And you build up that tolerance for uncertainty, which is so important in like every aspect of life, really.
Absolutely. It's about shifting our perspective from seeing risk as something to be feared to seeing it as an opportunity for growth.
I like that. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about controlling our emotions.
Yes. This is a big one.
It is, and I know some people might say, wait, shouldn't we just embrace our emotions, let them flow freely?
And that's a valid point. It's not about suppressing our emotions or pretending we don't feel them. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to them. We don't have to be ruled by them.
Right, because we've all had those moments where our emotions get the best of us, and it usually doesn't end well. Like saying something we regret in the heat of the moment or making a rash decision based on anger or fear.
Exactly. Morin gives the example of a client named James, who was struggling to control his anger and resentment towards his ex-wife. He felt like she was constantly trying to undermine him and make him look bad in front of their daughter.
Oof, that's a tough situation. It's easy to let those emotions take over when it involves family.
It is. And while it's understandable to feel anger and resentment in that situation, James was letting those emotions control his behavior. He was obsessing over his ex-wife's actions, sending angry texts, and even considering legal action. It was consuming him.
So, how do we prevent that from happening? How do we learn to manage those strong emotions in a more constructive way?
That's what we'll explore next time. Morin has some really practical strategies for recognizing our triggers, developing healthy coping mechanisms, and reframing our thoughts to create more positive emotional responses.
Okay, so we're back. And last time we were, getting into some pretty intense stuff with controlling our emotions, which honestly I think is one of the toughest parts of building mental strength.
I agree, it's definitely one of the most challenging aspects.
Yeah.
But remember, we were saying it's not about ignoring those feelings, right?
No, exactly. It's more about learning to manage them so they don't completely run the show.
Exactly. And Morin outlines a really helpful three-step approach for doing just that.
Ooh, I like a good three-step approach. Lay it on me.
All right, so step one is all about identifying your emotional triggers, those specific situations or, even certain people who just tend to push your buttons.
Yeah, like that one coworker who, every time you talk to them, you just feel your blood pressure rising.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's traffic jams or, family gatherings, whatever it is. The key is to pay attention to those patterns and really become aware of what tends to set you off.
Self-awareness is so important. It's like the foundation for everything else, isn't it?
It really is. And once you've identified your triggers, you can start to anticipate those situations and, prepare yourself mentally and emotionally for them.
So you're not caught off guard and reacting impulsively.
Right. And that leads us to step two, which is all about developing your toolbox of healthy coping strategies.
Oh, okay, like our emotional first aid kit.
Exactly. So we're talking things like deep breathing exercises, mindfulness techniques, physical activity, maybe even just removing yourself from a situation for a few minutes until you've calmed down a bit.
Sometimes you just need to step away and take a breather, right?
Exactly. And it's important to remember that what works for one person might not work for another. So it's all about experimenting with different techniques and figuring out what helps you personally regain your emotional balance.
I used to think that taking a break when things got heated was like a sign of weakness. Like giving in or letting the other person win.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, I think a lot of us have that ingrained belief that we need to be tough and in control all the time.
Mm.
But in reality, it takes a lot more strength to recognize when you need to step back and regroup.
Yeah. It's like choosing to respond thoughtfully rather than just reacting impulsively.
Exactly. Okay, so we've identified our triggers. We've got our coping strategies on hand. What's step three?
The grand finale.
The grand finale is all about reframing your thoughts. Because a lot of times, our emotional reactions are driven by, irrational or distorted thinking patterns.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say someone cuts you off in traffic.
Mm.
Your immediate thought might be, that jerk, he did that on purpose, he's trying to make me late, and you feel that surge of anger and frustration.
Oh, yeah, been there.
But what if, instead of jumping to that conclusion, you reframe the situation? You think, maybe he's just having a bad day, or maybe you didn't even see me.
It's like choosing to give them the benefit of the doubt instead of assuming the worst.
Right. It doesn't mean you're condoning their behavior, but it allows you to shift your emotional response.
So it's about recognizing that you have power over your thoughts and that your thoughts ultimately influence your feelings.
Exactly. You're not just a helpless victim of your circumstances. You have the ability to choose how you respond.
That's empowering. Okay, so we've covered dwelling on the past, giving up after failure, resentment, impatience, fear of solitude, entitlement, neglecting humility, avoiding setting boundaries, shying away from risks, not controlling our emotions. What else is on Morin's list of things mentally strong people don't do?
Well, this one might seem a bit counterintuitive, but they don't shy away from vulnerability.
Vulnerability, isn't that kind of like the opposite of what we think of when we think of mental strength? Like,
Mhm.
shouldn't we be tough and hide our weaknesses?
That's what we're often taught, right? To project this image of strength and confidence and never let them see you sweat. But Morin argues that true strength actually lies in embracing our imperfections and allowing ourselves to be seen for who we truly are, flaws and all.
It's about having the courage to admit when we're struggling To ask for help when we need it.
Exactly. And often it's in those moments of vulnerability that we form the deepest connections with others.
Because we're being authentic and real.
Exactly. And it allows others to do the same. Morin tells a story about a client named Lucas who had a really hard time admitting his mistakes. He was, considered an expert in his field.
So his ego was kind of tied up in being right all the time.
Totally. And it was preventing him from truly connecting with his colleagues and growing as a leader. Once he learned to let go of that need to be perfect and embrace vulnerability, his whole approach shifted.
It's like realizing that it's okay to not have all the answers, to be a work in progress.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Amy Morin's book. We've talked about all sorts of things that mentally strong people don't do, from dwelling on the past to shying away from vulnerability.
It's been a lot to unpack, but I feel like we've gained some really valuable insights into what it truly means to be mentally strong.
I agree. And it's important to remember that building mental strength isn't a destination. It's a journey, a lifelong process of growth and self-discovery.
And it's not about being perfect or never experiencing negative emotions. It's about developing the skills and the resilience to navigate life's challenges in a way that feels empowering.
And to remember that you're not alone on this journey. We all face challenges. We all have moments of weakness, and that's okay.
That's a great reminder. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Well, it's been fantastic exploring all of this with you today. I hope our listeners feel inspired to, take what they've learned and start building their own mental strength, one step at a time.
Here's to a stronger, more resilient you.